Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Future of Jewish podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Hoffman. On this episode, I am joined by Rabbi Steven Burg. He is the CEO of Aish, a global organization with a singular focus of imparting timeless Jewish wisdom that uplifts and inspires people to live more thoughtful, spiritual, and impactful lives. He also serves on the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency and as an executive board member of the Rabbinical Council of America. Prior to Aish, Rabbi Burg was the Eastern Director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, where he oversaw the Museum of Tolerance in New York City and contributed to the center's fight against antisemitism. Enjoy my conversation with Rabbi Steven Burg. Rabbi Burg, wow, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I've actually been following you quite closely since we scheduled this, and I interviewed your colleague, Jimmy Geller, recently, and I've spoken with your PR person, Rachel Moore. So this is really a pleasure for me to finally get to speak to you. Before we get into the great work that you're doing and leading at Aish, why don't you tell us about your background, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I've heard great things about you as well. And in talking now, I realize we both have LA roots, which bonds us tremendously. I grew up in Brooklyn, and that's an exciting story. My father was a pulpit rabbi. All of Shalom passed away, but I was in his synagogue for 45 years. I guess I kind of caught that bug to work for the Jewish people from him. Went on to get my master's rabbinical ordination from Yeshiva University. And when I walked into an event, a Shabbaton in NCSY, when I was 19, I was totally blown away and said, this is what I want to do with my life. I spent 22 years in NCSY. I was an assistant director, regional director of West Coast. That's when I was in LA. And then eventually the international director of NCSY and the managing director of the OU. NCSY is part of the OU. So I kind of sat in those seats. Went to the Simon Wiesenthal Center for a couple of years. When I was in LA, I became very good friends with Rabbi May, who was executive director. And when I left the OU after 22 years, that's the place I went. He was my mentor. And then that's when Aish found me 7 years ago this July, and came over to Aish to kind of help rebuild. My calling has always been to take over and rebuild. Like a lot of times organizations run into trouble. I guess if I was a lawyer, I'd be a bankruptcy lawyer. If I was in business, I'd be a turnaround guy. I'm just a rabbi, so I help organizations get back on their feet. And that's what we've done with Aish the last 7 years, thank God. Amazing. So just for my listeners that don't know what NCSY is, it's the National Conference of Synagogue Youth.
Yeah, it's part of the Orthodox Union. It's the largest teen movement in North America and in Latin America also, over 20,000 Jewish teens.
So take me back to that event you're talking about, that you just had like this awakening or this burning desire all of a sudden. Like, can you point to something specific that it was, or was it more intrinsic? What was going on there?
Sure, absolutely. I remember like it was yesterday. It was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Squirrel Hill. That's where all the Jews live there. It's a terrific community. I spent a Shabbat there, and we got to like the end of Shabbat, and we have the Havdalah ceremony. And Havdalah ceremony for NCSY sometimes can go on for like an hour and a half. Usually most people's homes is 30 seconds, but they got a band and the spirit and everything. And I think it's at that point I realized that Judaism without passion is meaningless. And what I saw there was passion, and even more than that, I saw passion in 15 and 16-year-olds, which people don't always connect. They feel that a lot of times teens are disconnected. And I found that NCSY was giving them a pathway to be passionate about their Judaism. And it hit me. And I don't think anything has changed, frankly, in over 30 years in my work for the Jewish people, is that Judaism without passion doesn't work. And we need to create programs and help people see that they could be passionate about their Judaism. Because once you're passionate about something, man, you love it, you're driven to work for it, and you embrace it.
I love what you just said about the fact that Judaism without passion is meaningless. And yet there's so many opportunities today to engage with Judaism, different organizations, local, regional, national, international, online, offline, Israel, diaspora, tons of money. I mean, we're talking about in the billions of dollars every year gets spent worldwide on Judaism and sort of Jewish engagement. And yet more and more Jews
lack that passion that you were talking about. I'm curious to know why in your purview that is.
I'll give you a little story that one of my mentors and my closest friends and one of our donors at Aish, our partners, Jake Aronoff, he lives in Montgomery, Alabama and Atlanta. He's a Southerner and an incredibly successful real estate businessman. And he once said to me, he was actually saying to my son, I was introduced, my son is in business school, and he once told me the story that he had a relative that built all these homes. And the homes that he built were the homes that he always wanted to build. And they were the homes that he personally loved. And he said, and you know what happened to my relative? He said he went bankrupt because they weren't the homes that anyone else wanted. And, that lesson was, you need to figure out, how people engage, how they're learning, how they're experiencing. I find that the Jewish community is always about 20 to 30 years behind in the way that they're trying to give things over. I can tell you at Aish, and you met Jamie Geller, so you know how incredible she is. We basically said, we've got the #1 website out there in the Jewish world, aish.com. It's getting 1 million people a month, right? But the bottom line is now young people don't go to websites. And so we shifted to social media. I hired Jamie Geller to do that. Last month in May, we went from 0 presence on TikTok to just in the month of May, over 1 million video views on TikTok. And so I think what made Aish special, and frankly, not just us, anyone that wants to make a difference, you could say that the Torah may not change, but the delivery mechanism does. People learn differently, they approach things differently. And I think that you're right, there's billions of dollars being spent, but I don't know that those dollars are being spent wisely, because I think you have to take a look at your population and say, how, oh, it's terrible, TikTok, it's 15 seconds, Instagram, right? But okay, but like that's how people are learning and studying today. And we need to take something really beautiful and package it in a way that can go to the Jewish consumer.
If we're spending all this money and have all these organizations that are supposed to be, creating and recreating this passion for Judaism in one way or another, the question, becomes, why are they incapable or uninterested in doing it? Because today, you mentioned Jamie and TikTok, and with digital, all the data is available to you. It's not a guessing game anymore. You can A/B test everything. We have more data about the Jewish world than we've ever had in Israel, in the diaspora. I'm just trying to understand, like, donors are maybe generally interested in, Jewish continuity or whatever, but they're also just really interested in having their money spent the way they want it being spent, whether or not that produces the kind of results that we all want to see. And I'm just curious, from your shoes, like, how do you mitigate sort of donor demands, whether implicit or explicit, versus like organizational imperatives and things that you believe as the head of your organization will move the Jewish world in the right direction?
Wow, that's an incredibly intelligent question, and it really cuts through some of the issues within the Jewish community. I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for others as well, but we are who we are, and what I've tried to build in Aish in the last 7 years is we're incredibly transparent. Our entire budget's online. You want to see our budgets, go to our website, click on it. You can read all my financials. I don't care. We're very, very straight. We're on a system where we set quarterly goals for the order. Every single person in the organization has quarterly goals. The organization has quarterly goals, and I share that with all my donors. Like, you want to know what we're doing? This is exactly what we're doing. There's no bait and switch here. This is who we are. And I've sat at board meetings, where I've had donors. I had one donor, a great guy. We're making the presentation on social media, and he just throws up his arm and he goes, "I don't understand a word you're telling me." This is a guy that ran a major financial institution, but they're smart enough to say, "I don't get it, but I can read the numbers and I understand that it's okay for me not to get." A lot of people, where I think the Jews get caught up. I had a colleague one time that went he actually went from, I think it was like one of these opera houses to work for the Jewish community. And I'm like, "What's the difference?" He's like, "Well, at the opera house, no one ever told us what to play." For Jews, a lot of Jews feel everyone's an expert in everything. And I think that what's remarkable about Aish donors, and I could just speak about myself, and Rav Noach Weinberg, we don't have donors, we have partners. We always refer to them as partners. And we're very direct in what we think the Jewish community is going and how we think we can solve it. And what I've said to them, we have a 10-year goal. It's called Aish Vision 2030. Our goal in the next 10 years is to get 3 million Jews, 20% of the Jewish population, studying Jewish wisdom. That's it. Forget anything else. We just want them to study Jewish wisdom. And, we turned to our donors and said, where am I going to find them? I'm looking for the unaffiliated. They're not in temples. They're not in JCCs. They're not in synagogues. They're nowhere, right? Every single one of them is on social media. Every single Jew today is on social media, So if we want to go find them and we want to, pitch them that Jewish wisdom could be meaningful in their lives, I got to be on social media. And so even if my partners don't fully understand and they don't have TikTok and they don't have Instagram, they understand that we have to go out and find these people. And I think a lot of the Jewish world, unfortunately, they like to hang out in space that makes them feel comfortable. I'll be honest with you, Josh, like I don't really know TikTok and Instagram, I rely on Jamie, but I'm comfortable as she does and a lot of other people do. And I'm comfortable being out of my comfort zone. Well, I find a lot of organizations, they'll be like, yes, we have, Twitter. I brought a group of young Israelis to a serious kind of old Jewish organization. They're like, don't forget to tag us on Twitter. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it was so like, yes, 10 years ago, you would have been, really cool and rad, right? Right now, they're like looking at you like, who are you, right? And then, you see the people running social media. And I have to tell you that like what we do for TikTok is we have young Jews and we pay them for content. And we just have this pushing in of content, right? Whereas you look at most Jewish organizations, they got social media people who are really nice, 60-year-olds or 55-year-olds and nothing against them, but like you got to know what the street wants.
The thing with social media is that you're totally right that that's where everyone is. And that's where you as an organization have to be. At the same time, we know that anti-Semitism has been, rampant
Sure.
in many ways on social media. And so in many ways, a lot of Jews are feeling increasingly uncomfortable, on social media, either expressing their Judaism or engaging with Judaism. And I just want to get your opinion about this or your viewpoint based on your experience where you did oversee the Museum of Tolerance in New York City. I've spoken to quite a few people in the Jewish world, donors, activists, lay leaders, rabbis, who, not everyone, but a lot of them have said that you can't fight anti-Semitism. One individual said it's like a weed, you can chop it off, it's going to grow back. I'm just curious, like from your vantage point and your experience, how you view the quote unquote fight against anti-Semitism.
It's surprising me to hear someone say you can't fight against anti-Semitism. You could say you can't, in the end, it's always going to be around and it will. But to me, the fight is more important than anything else because it teaches the next generation that as Jews, we always fight for survival. There's one of the things, I'll tell you a story when I was at Simon Wiesenthal Center, and this is very impactful. Simon Wiesenthal himself was very, very moving to me. He's one of my idols. He's one of the people I look up to in the world. The guy's a Holocaust survivor, survives hell, and then goes out to like help track down over 1,300 Nazi war criminals. And he did it by himself because post-World War II, the US really had to join with Germany against Russia, so it was very complicated time. And he just went out there and he did amazing things. I'll never forget, I'm at a parking garage in Manhattan when I was working for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. There's some Jewish guys there, and we're talking this and that. We're Simon Wiesenthal Center, and they make the following comment to me. And they say to me, come on, like if there are any Nazis around, they're old guys in wheelchairs. You really think those are the guys we got to be chasing? Like literally, that's, because Simon Wiesenthal, he was a Nazi hunter. And I said, like, I hear what you're saying, but the bottom line is if someone touches the hair on a Jew's head, I want them to know that until they're in their grave, we're going to be chasing them. And to me, it's not about defeating anti-Semitism. It's that, after 2,000 years of getting beat up and thrown out of every country, dude, you want to go? Fine, we'll drop the gloves. I'm saying these aren't the same Jews. We're gonna hit you back, and we're gonna take you on, and we're not afraid of you, with all due respect. And I think for a lot of us growing up with Israel, we've a little bit like, oh great, there's Israel. Israel will fight that fight. Israel needs help. Israel needs help from every single Jew. And as far as I'm concerned, there are two things a Jew has to make sure of. They have to look out for the spiritual welfare of their fellow Jews and the physical welfare of their fellow Jews, because that's what Moses did. Moses gave us the 10 Commandments. He gave us the Torah. He gave us Jewish wisdom spiritually, but he also saved us from genocide in Egypt. right? That was the same guy. And, so to me, man, bring it on. I even at Aish, I'm constantly, you've seen a lot of my op-eds and stuff, I'm still trying to fight the fight.
Absolutely. And I think your op-eds, by the way, are phenomenal. I really enjoy reading them. I do want to push back though, just for the sake of playing devil's advocate. You talked about always fighting for survival, and maybe they're not mutually exclusive, but sometimes I feel that if we're always in survival mode, then we can't be in thriving mode. And so maybe you might say, and other people might say, no, you can fight for survival and fight for thriving at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. But I'm just wondering, like in an age of, I don't know, like we're just pulled in so many directions today as people, right? With digital media and social media and soon to be virtual reality and, all the different aspects and options we have at our disposal today, that it often is a +1, -1, meaning if I choose to do X, then I can't do Y. Not because I don't want to do Y, just because I'm choosing to do X. And so I'm just wondering, like, if Jews for a change, like said, you know what, we're not going to acknowledge the, this anti-Semitic behavior and actions and words. And we're just going to go out and show the world why Jews are so amazing, both as people themselves, but also as contributors to the greater world. And it's sort of like the kill them with kindness type of thing. I mean, I'm just curious, as I sort of paint that picture, what goes through your mind?
Look, I think that Jews are always in at simultaneously survive and thrive mode, right? I always tell the joke that, they're burning down some shtetl in Europe, some like town in Europe, and these two guys grab the Torahs and they're running out of the town, and then they start to fight who's president of the building committee in the next town. Like that's who we are. We've been to every place, we build it up, and then we get kicked out. We build up the next place because we're optimists and pessimists at the same time. It's so funny to be a Jew in a lot of ways. But look, I tell you, I think that we have to fight it because, believe it or not even so much for the anti-Semites, but it's for our own Jewish brothers and sisters, because there's so many Jewish brothers and sisters out there that are so far from Judaism, and they hear this garbage, from the UN, and they hear this garbage from all these other places, and they start to, one of the things that, if you ask me, that I wrestle with and hurts me the most is that you have so many young Jews coming after Israel, right? Because they just don't know our narrative. We haven't taught them our narrative. And frankly, I think we have to go toe to toe and fight because we do have a narrative. And more so, I don't think I'm going to, these some of these anti-Semites, they hate us. A guy, it's like, I'm not going to change his mind per se, but I want a lot of the Jews out there, young Jews, to see that I'm fighting, to see that there's another side, to see there's something that they can be proud about, right? Because they should be proud. And I think the Israelis struggle with that a little bit. I have a good friend who's in VC, and he is American in Israel, does really well. I'm like, and he helps all the Israeli companies. I'm like, what do they struggle with? He said the Israelis struggle a little bit with storytelling. They kind of have the attitude like, what, doesn't everyone know we're right? And I'm like, no, they really don't. So I think that, and that's the benefit of Jews in diaspora. We are a little better at that. And I think we can help out Israel. And, I've got a lot of good friends in Israeli government and stuff, and we're constantly trying to help them do stuff because I think, we're all Israeli, we're all Jewish, we're all one.
Absolutely. One more question on this topic, and then I want to move to some other questions. So actually, an Israeli ex-girlfriend of mine taught me a really great saying. She said, you don't attract bees with vinegar, you attract them with honey. And I just feel that anti-Semitism, when we're talking, or anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, when we're talking from Jew to another Jew, as sort of you were just talking about, that it's almost like we're trying to attract them with vinegar. And I think one of the things that I think Aish has done very well of late under your watch, but not only, is really attracting people with honey. And so I'm just wondering, like, as we talk about the fight against anti-Semitism, like, to me, there's a lot of vinegar and there needs to be more honey. And to that, you say what?
I say that I vehemently agree with your ex-girlfriend, which is a weird comment to say, right, on the podcast. But she was spot on. And I've been saying this to my buddies in Israel for a long time. And Danny Danone, who's a close friend, I think he's a terrific guy. He was great at the UN. We host all the time. He brings ambassadors, and now Gilad Erdogan brings them, and we have them all the time. And Danny, one time, he got up and the Security Council with a Bible, with a Tanakh, and he was like waving it around. And when he came to Israel, I'm like, Danny, that was awesome. That was great. He's like, yeah, all my friends in Israel are making fun of me. They're calling me Rabbi Danny now, And he said, but without the Bible, where's our claim to Israel? Where's anything? And the point I keep making to a lot of the folks in Israel, which is that without Torah knowledge, without Jewish wisdom, without understanding the history that we all go back together, there's no connection between us. You can't separate Zionism and the fight of anti-Semitism away from Jewish wisdom. And the more Jewish wisdom you give someone, the stronger they passionately feel. That goes back to that passion that we spoke about in the beginning. The stronger they feel about being Jewish, and you're 100% right. You know, there's a longer conversation I have about how Abraham built a religion on what he loved, not on what he hated, right? He built it on a love for the Almighty, and that's what connects us. And if you pull that out and you don't have that, so really what does connect us, right? So you're 100% right. I think that one of the ways to fight anti-Semitism and to fight all these things is for us to come together and rally around Jewish wisdom. And the added benefit is it improves our lives and will make us, you know, just better people.
So speaking about Aish, you know, following in Rabbi Noah Weinberg's footsteps is obviously probably quite, maybe in the beginning it was quite overwhelming, and now probably you've settled in. But I'm just curious, like, a founder has a vision and has a legacy, obviously, and has built the organization. But then when they hand it off to somebody else, you know, they have their own vision and they have their own life experiences and they have their own ways of just looking at the world, which is fine. And a lot of things can be in parallel or totally the same. And some things might not be. And I'm just curious from your vantage point, how do you juggle sort of the legacy that Rabbi Weinberg left and sort of the legacy that he would want Aish to have versus, you know, you coming in and doing what you feel is best for the organization and ultimately for the Jewish people?
Look, as a CEO, as your CEO, I'm a CEO, you know, you walk into an organization, first of all, there's something you see in the organization. There's a spark that you spot when you take it over. I'm not talking about a startup, but when you take over something that's already going on, there's something you saw that was a diamond there that sometimes needs to be brushed off a little bit, polished, but there was something there. For me, when Aish approached me 7.5 years ago, whatever it was, the thing that stood out to me most about Aish, and you know, in many ways, this was like I felt like their USP, you know, the unique selling point, is that the idea of taking responsibility. Rav Noah talked about achrayut, taking responsibility, that Jews have to take responsibility for the Jewish people. He didn't build, like, people make this mistake. They feel like, oh, he went out and built this studying Jewish educational institution because he wanted people more educated. He said that Jewish people is faced with a set of problems, and we have to, whenever someone is not trying to solve them, we have to solve them. So people are assimilating, very much so, intermarrying and leaving the Jewish people. He created this institution to educate, but other institutions came out of Aish as well, and it always confuses people. When the rockets were falling on Sderot originally, right, and no one was paying attention only in the beginning, there was the guy there who saw everything happening, and he's like, "What? I want to do something. What do I do?" They said, "Go visit Rabbi Noah Weinberg in the old city." He comes to Rav Noah. He tells Rav Noah what's going on. Rav Noah opens up a drawer. He hands him money and says, "I want you to buy a car and a video camera and tell the world." And that became the first Sderot advocacy group that was built. You know, when during the 2001 Intifada, when everything was going on, tear gas, rocks, everything, buses were blowing up. Rabbi Noah Weinberg got up in the Beit Midrash and said, "I want everyone for half an hour to think about what you can do about what's going on outside." There was a young man named Elliot Matthias who, you know, showed up in a Grateful Dead and long hair, T-shirt, not connected to Jewish people, was there studying. He's like, "Well, you know, why don't we educate Jews on campus to fight for Israel?" He shows up in the foreign ministry because no one told him you can't just walk into the foreign ministry, right? He shows up and he's like, "I want money to go do this." And you know what they said? "Okay, go ahead." And Hasbara Fellowships was started, and thousands of young people have been trained, right? So the philosophy of Aish that really spoke to me, and it's almost like I had been looking for this my whole life, was that concept of responsibility, that Jews must take responsibility for other Jews, right? We're family, we're brothers and sisters, and family takes responsibility for family. And so what I've tried to do is take that piece of Rav Noah, and I talk about it all the time, and I credit him. And it doesn't mean, but then we're doing a lot of things differently. Like I said, we moved into social media. We've shifted around, but that general original philosophy was so powerful to me, and it was so moving that I've had zero problem keeping up with it because it's what's on my heart.
Well, beautifully said. I appreciate that. You had a few things there that you mentioned that I took some note of. So I want to get to a few things. First, you talked about assimilation. And, you're in New York right now, I believe, and I'm in Tel Aviv. And we know, Israel is a Jewish state, but the minute you step outside, you're really at the risk of assimilation. We know that in non-Orthodox Jewish communities, the intermarriage rate today is something like 72%. I'm just curious how you personally, but also professionally, look at assimilation. Do you agree that, as some people call it, a death by assimilation? Do you think that there's opportunities, particularly in interfaith families and marriages, to sort of look at it as a plus one? How do you think about this subject?
It's interesting. You use the number 72%. In North America, and by the way, people should know 85 to 90% of world Jewry is North America and Israel right now, right? There's some other pockets, but that's really where everyone is. If you take Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, the pro-Israel community, take everyone that's connected in some way to Israel or Jews, they amount to 28%. So 72%, like you were saying, have zero connection to anything Jewish in their lives day to day. That's our target audience, by the way, at Aish. We go after the 72%. As far as I think that the Jewish people will always be around, right? We've been around for 3,500 years. We're always going to be around. The only question is who, right? And now the way I view it is that we're brothers and sisters is not, it's not just a terminology. It's not just something that people picked up from Shlomo Carlebach, my beautiful brothers and sisters, right? We're brothers and sisters, right? We're a family. And the bottom line is, when I see Jews, just as if they were in my immediate family, when I see Jews that are just walking away from a birthright, from something that could really affect them so positively, they're not fleeing, they're not like exiting. They just don't know anything about it. They don't know how precious it is. So that pains me. That pains me. I believe, and this is my personal belief, that pains the Almighty as well, right? And therefore, what he wants is for his children to look after one another. So for me, it's very personal to try and get Jewish knowledge and wisdom to the Jews out there that don't have any. It's very important for me, for them to understand the beauty of the homeland of Israel and to try and get them to visit. These are very, very personal pieces to me, because number one is they literally are my brothers and sisters. And number two is they didn't exit by choice. No one ever offered it to them. And number three, and this really, really bothers me more than anything, a lot of young people, if we don't make this case to them, they're going to go support the other side. They're going to go basically join the anti-Israel folks. And that, there's nothing more painful to me than seeing a Jewish young person who is basically, railing against Israel. It makes me cry.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It kind of reminds me of like people that ultimately vote for candidates that don't have their best interests in mind. But I'm with you on that. The other thing that you mentioned is, Jews taking responsibility for other Jews, which is very powerful in and of itself. And one of the things, I came from a Reform upbringing. Today I have tattoos. Wouldn't say I'm a believer in God necessarily, although I don't argue anymore that God doesn't exist. I think that's called being agnostic technically. I sometimes wrap tefillin when I'm walking in Tel Aviv and I see some Orthodox guys saying, "Hey, do you want to rap?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm into it. Don't really know what I'm praying for, but it feels good." And recently I've been doing a lot of writing, and I'm trying to, I believe that ultimately my audience is non-Orthodox. And I don't really have what I would call like serious Orthodox friends, but I am speaking a lot more to Orthodox folks or modern Orthodox or ultra Orthodox. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the non-Orthodox Jewish community to have more empathy and compassion for the Orthodox community. And because I think people that come from where I come from, both in Israel and abroad, are very critical of the Orthodox community. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be constructively critical of each other. That's actually how we can grow and prosper. But I find that a lot of the criticism that comes from the non-Orthodox Jewish world toward the Orthodox Jewish world is not constructive. It's either surface value judgments, or it's misinformation, or it's stigmas. And I'm just wondering from your vantage point, if you feel also that the Orthodox Jewish community has unfair and unjust opinions about the non-Orthodox Jewish community, and ultimately, how can we bridge these gaps, if you will, so that we can have everyone thinking and acting in terms of taking responsibility for one another?
Look, I think that the most important thing that the Jewish people needs is unity, and I think you need points of unity. When I mean by points of unity, Aish's goal and job, our goal is really not to create more Orthodox Jews. That's really not our goal. Our goal is to put Jewish wisdom in the hand of every Jew, right? And my point is, you could be Reformed and someone could be Orthodox, but you can read a verse together and have a discussion. That's our heritage. Our grandparents are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel. Like we're family, and you should be able to have those kind of conversations together. I think those are super important conversations to be able to have, and to be able, and I think that look, I am Orthodox, and I'll tell you, I think one of the poor choice of words is when people say outreach. I'm doing outreach. I'm reaching down to you. Okay, come here, little boy. I'll give you like something. Like, it should be engagement. It should be, you're probably more spiritual than me in certain areas. I may be learned in other areas, right? And we should be able to engage with each other in true mutual respect. I think in Israel it gets complicated because there's no separation of church and state, and there's a lot of policy issues that people fight over. I don't get involved in those. I don't want to get involved in those. I can let other people do that. I can tell you that we have a program, this incredible program. It's called Triumph. It's basically we take young Israeli entrepreneurs who are out of the army, mostly secular, and we basically teach them how to create programs for Jewish people. It's really amazing. We do a whole training, and one of the things we do is we bring them to New York for like a week, and they meet with all kinds of different business people, et cetera, folks. So we have one of our donors, really incredible guy. He's Satmar Chassid from Williamsburg, and he loved this program. He's like, I want to host them. And we started this a bunch of years ago, where he rents out a hotel in Williamsburg, and food, music, hanging out, right? And he brings a bunch of Satmar Chassidim down, and we got a bunch of secular Israelis, and they hang out together the whole night. And the first time we did it, one of our mentors, who's a secular guy, a secular Israeli, he had served in the government for many years. He was so angry at us. He was like ready to punch us. He was so angry. And by the end of the night, he kissed this Satmar Chassid on the kepi. I'll use that, like on the head, because the entire, what the agenda tonight was? For Jews to talk to Jews. And what should happen is we need to suspend agendas, throw them out the window, whatever it is, and just be able to talk. And I believe a good way to talk is through Jewish wisdom. What do we got in common? Like, let's take a look at a verse. Let's take a look at a Jewish teaching. And, what do you think? What do I think? But the heck with agenda. I think that one of the great movements has been the Shabbos Project, right? There's been this massive movement, and one of the great things, one of my mentors also, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Goldstein from South Africa, he specifically would not go through movements. He only went through Facebook. He didn't want Orthodox, Reform, or Conservative, and God bless them all. They're wonderful, but it was just people to people. And when you do people to people, things work a lot better. That's what I find.
I couldn't agree more. And what I think is interesting, not that we didn't have an agenda, but what I think is interesting is that the more people engage with what you call Jewish wisdom, which is also Jewish history and philosophy and the different strands that come from those things, like somebody like me who used to be atheist, right? Which is basically saying there is no God. Y'all are living in a movie that I want no part of, which I used to be. But then when I started really diving into Jewish wisdom, I found myself saying, wait, like maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't. I'm not so preoccupied with that question still. But what I am finding is I'm going down this rabbit hole. Like now I have, Rabbi Weinberg's book right here standing next to me, 48 Ways to Wisdom, I believe it's called. And, I've read a whole bunch of other books now about Judaism. And I find that like people like me, which is like the Israelis and the Jews in the diaspora, I find that like the moment we're able to really sit with this great Jewish wisdom and do it consistently, because there's so much of it that you can't there's no shortcut. We'll become not necessarily more religious, but like we'll do things that are more like what the quote unquote Orthodox would do, whether it's like lighting candles on Sabbath or like turning our phone off on Sabbath. And then that again, like has its own evolution of like, for this year, I only light candles. And the next year I turn my phone off. And then in 2 years, I might be doing a full Shomer Shabbos. And I find that it's our job, like that has to be our job, right? I know that's what Aish is trying to do with this 2030 vision, is like getting more of this Jewish wisdom in relevant ways, as you talked about delivery before, because the minute where people have it, it's like you can't be exposed to it and say, this is not going to bring me career value, spiritual value, potentially religious value, relationship value. I mean, there's just, right, like there's just, the more that I read about, for example, Rabbi Weinberg, is like, I'm just finding myself like, wait, I can apply this in my business, and I can apply this in my relationships, and I can apply this with my family, and here's some spiritual stuff. And like, to me, I just find it fascinating, and I really, hope that you and the rest of us can get this wisdom in front of people's eyes, because the minute it's there, it's like, wow, this is the ultimate self-help in the age of self-help, right?
Oh, absolutely. I went once years ago to a Tony Robbins seminar. I went to hear him speak for 12 hours. I couldn't imagine that there was a guy that could hold everyone's attention. So I went there and it was unbelievable, but afterwards I was like, almost everything he said you could find in Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avot, and I talked to a lot of Jews. I travel a lot. Jews are very spiritual people, and the amount of Jews I meet that watch Pastor Joel Osteen, who's like one of the mega church guys, who is a nice message. So I was talking to some partners of ours, and I was like, look, a lot of Jews are going Joel Osteen. They're like, oh, he was out here. We had front row tickets, So, and I said to them, I said, that's fine, but wouldn't it be great if we had Rabbi Joel Osteen? Like, wouldn't it be great if we had rabbis on a mega level giving over our wisdom that people are turning to? And they just said to me, absolutely, absolutely. So people are searching and trying to find this stuff. It's not like they're not searching, trying to find this stuff. They just don't know that we've got this, like that, frankly, they don't know we gave it to everyone else. We gave ethics and morality to the world. And I think we need to have that big movement back there. And it's only, as we said before, going to come through engagement, through like talking to people as peers, as brothers, as sisters, not as like, oh, let me help you be religious, little man. Like, I'm saying, this condescension on all sides has to go. And, if you guys want to fight over policy and government stuff in Israel, okay, go fight, but don't throw the baby with the bathwater, and that's where I think people go crazy.
Two things that you mentioned that I want to ask you about. First thing is that Tony Robbins. So I spoke with somebody, I know him, I'm not going to mention his name, but he wants to be the Tony Robbins of the Jewish world, which, you can say whatever you want to say about, somebody who says that. But I think he has a point in that we don't have dynamic leaders. And I apologize if I insult you in saying that, Rabbi Burg, but when I say dynamic,
I'm going to vehemently agree with you when you're done.
I've actually been on the record, and I've written about this in a few different essays, is that, you can name the CEOs of all the quote unquote great brands and companies in the world. How many people can name Jews, obviously, how many Jews can name the CEOs of Jewish organizations? I mean, I've played this game with a few of my Jewish friends, and the answer is basically 0 out of 10 every time. And so I'm just wondering, like, as the CEO of a major Jewish organization, like, to me, Jewish organizations are great for a lot of things, but in terms of really that dynamism and that, like you talked about, Tony Robbins talking for 12 straight hours, and he probably could have done another 12 hours easily. Putting a face to the name is important. And I don't feel that either we don't have the people in the positions of leadership, such as CEO, that are able to command that kind of attention and respect in an appropriate way, or they just don't do that for different reasons that I have no idea about. I mean, what say you?
I don't think there's a greater loss that the Jewish people have suffered in the last, quarter century for sure than Jonathan Sacks. Everywhere I go, people are mourning his loss. When I used to go to the White House, people were walking around Jonathan Sacks's books. He was the man. And I think that in the Jewish world, forget the CEOs for a second. CEOs are guys that run, whatever they are, but scholars, people who are real substantive people that are out there, you think back to like Elie Wiesel and Simon Wiesenthal, like these names at every single point, who didn't know them, it's really, really to have those people. We don't really have those people. Jonathan Sacks's death was just a killer, because who in the Jewish world, and I think that to a certain extent we preach to the choir, right? We'll have like rabbis who like are YouTube stars because, their congregation and maybe another 50 people watch them, who is out there in a Jewish way and who's identified with being Jewish, who's really spreading this wisdom. I honestly, we're totally bereft right now. It's killing me. I kid you not. I was Rabbi Elliot Matthias, who I mentioned before, started Hosmer Fellowship. He's our COO. He's in the next room. I was having a massive conversation yesterday. Going, who is the next Rabbi Jonathan Sacks? It's a killer to us. And to me, that's something that we have to fix. That's something Aish I'd like to try and fix, but it's not simple. It has to be someone that is not just speaking to religious Jews and is not just speaking to secular Jews, but who can speak to the whole world, right? Jonathan Sacks had a platform where people sat up and listened to him. And, I wish I had a better answer, except that I'm so, like you are, I'm so bothered by this, and I'm committed to trying to help to fix it.
I'm glad you brought up Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, blessed memory, of course. The word rabbi kind of has a negative connotation, I would say, in some cases. Not for me personally, but I would say that, I don't know, like when you think about monks, right? Buddhist monks. I mean, if you were to go up to somebody on the street in New York and you were to say, okay, I'm going to name like monk, priest, and rabbi. And then people would, give me some adjectives. So monk, they would say like, oh, peaceful, like meditating, whatever. Priest, we know what's happened with priests recently, so it's probably not a good connotation. And rabbi, I think they would just be like, either I don't know, like I don't have an adjective for that, or just like religious or like weird, or I don't know, like, and so I've been spending a little time thinking about this. It's like the word Rebbe feels cool, feels interesting, feels different. And I'm thinking, because I come from a branding and marketing background, could we rebrand rabbis to Rebbes? Because ultimately, when, think about it, if we have a great rabbi speaking in LA or New York or Tel Aviv, and it says, hey, come watch, I'll just use your name, Rabbi Steve Burg, or it's Rebbe Steve Burg, like maybe there's not a big difference there, but to me, and maybe Rebbe is not the best, alternative, but to me, like we have to do a better job of rebranding the rabbi as a sage, as somebody who's incredibly wise, because I think once we are able to rebrand it in that way, you'll start getting a lot more of the next Jonathan Sacks's. What do you think about that?
Josh, I've been doing this a long time. It's not very often that someone throws something at me that my head's spinning and I'm thinking about what you said. I actually think there's a lot. I thought you were going a totally different direction, and I was ready to answer you, and then you went in that really cool rebrand direction. I'm like, whoa, that is something to think about. Look, years ago, I remember the Reform movement. I grew up in youth movements, that culture for 20 years, and the Reform, they would call their rabbis Rabbi Josh, Rabbi Mike, Rabbi Dave. And I was always like, that's cool. Like, why are we so formal? I think, first of all, I think the world's a much more informal place. You walk into a, Manhattan law firm today, no one's wearing suits, whereas years ago, everything was buttoned up and stuff. I think the world's changed a lot. Whether Rebbe is a name or Rav, like, now I'm thinking I should switch it. It happens to be, I don't use Rabbi a lot. When I lobby, I do. When I do most stuff, I'm just Steve. But wouldn't it be better to be Rav Steve? Like, forget my last name. Who cares my last name? Rav Steve is here. I think we have to do a lot of thinking on that. I love it. Love that thought process. Love it.
Appreciate that. That's very kind and admirable coming from you. So I appreciate that. Last question. I want to go back to your professional background. Just curious, looking back on your younger self, what's some advice, knowing what you know today, that you would give to your younger self, your younger professional self?
Wow. It's good. That's an excellent question. It's a funny thing. My master's is in medieval Jewish history. I think I probably would have done, but all my stuff's been in the business end. When I was interviewed for Aish, I met with one of the top lay leaders doing the search, and we were talking about all kinds of strategies, business approach, et cetera. And he's like, I didn't know there were rabbis like you. I said, well, I'm a CEO in a rabbi's body, And I think I would have wished that I had done a little more training. I went to Harvard Business. I went to Kellogg. I did a couple of things afterwards. That I wish I had done a little more training, I think, in that area. And I think that fundraising, certain things like that. It's one of the things that I've said many times is like, and it's fundraising almost sounds like a dirty word. And I think rabbis come out with that and they get all like nervous and stuff. And so you realize that, like, look, you're a CEO of a for-profit. You gotta fund, the vision. You gotta basically create partners and let them come on board with you. And I think that I wish someone had kind of given me that talk years ago. I think I found it a lot more significant at Aish. I wish young rabbis were getting that talk that, like, look, tzedakah is a beautiful thing. And it's one of the things that really makes it you. And don't feel bad, because this person, by them giving you some money, they're becoming your partner. And I think maybe the business world understands that a little bit more than perhaps, the rabbi side of it. I'm not saying the federations and other places don't understand it, but certainly no one explained that to me. And so I think those kind of things, I wish a lot of stuff I learned, it was just like, as a CEO, you just do stuff and you figure stuff out and you move forward. I wish I would have, been a little more knowledgeable going back, but I'll be honest with you, I look back, I have no regrets. I had a great career. I still, hopefully, as far as I know, I'm still having a great career. And I've met the most beautiful people along the way. And it's just, the trip of a lifetime.
Last question. What's one thing that you thought about Aish that, since taking this position a few years ago, you either no longer believe to be true or is completely different than what you originally thought?
I think coming in, that whole transformation, my thought process, and I want to give credit here, Rabbi Berkowitz really took over the mantle from Rav Noach in terms of being our spiritual leader. And that whole idea of outreach versus engagement, Rav Berkowitz's vision was basically pushing very hard into this Torah learning. Like, he basically feels like, our role is to create relationships between Jews and the Almighty. And the way to do that is through Jewish wisdom. And through his greatness, really pushing that piece that I didn't really fully understand coming in. And now I appreciate like crazy. So our job is not to just make little clones of ourselves. Like, let's just put out little Orthodox Jews or whatever it is. Our job is to basically take really smart, beautiful people and give them a taste of Jewish wisdom. And that's okay. Don't worry about the other 612 commandments. Like, this is the one that really could change people's lives. And his strength and his beauty, Rav Berkowitz, of being able to basically say, this is what we believe, and this is within the norms. I don't know that I fully got that coming in. I fully get it now. I talk about it incessantly, and it's something really beautiful that I've come to appreciate.
I lied. I have one more question. Excuse me. So I heard from people that you took over the organization. It wasn't in the best position possible, and I won't go into some of the details that were shared with me, but whatever. Every organization has,
Oh, we were bankrupt, Josh. You don't have to like.
Okay, so you said it, not me. Yeah,
it was bad news.
Yeah. So you take, you come in, and I guess you knew that before taking the position officially. I would hope you knew that at least. But regardless, can you share with us some of the things that you did? You don't have to go into very specific detail, because I'm sure some of it's confidential, but just some of the things that we can learn from you about, what you did and the approaches you took and the changes that you made, and some of the things that you kept, by the way, as well, that allowed the organization, from what I understand now in 2022 moving forward, to be in a very good position financially and otherwise.
Yeah, look, I don't think anyone did anything wrong per se, and I want to be clear about that. There's no malfeasance as far as I do, et cetera. But Rav Noach Weinberg passed away. When you take the charismatic kind of founder out of the organization, everything starts to unravel to a certain extent. Aish, you'll appreciate this as a CEO. Aish was a small business that became really large and internally never caught up, and so that was also an issue. And there were a lot of issues like that. And like I said, every job I basically took in my career were jobs no one else wanted. Number one is it just made it easier. There were no other candidates. And number two is, you can't go any further down. So you can only go up. So I always thought that was a good play. But we worked really hard on figuring out our finances. Number one, where the money was, what we had to pay back. We paid, just to tell you, be honest, we paid down $11 million on our first 4 years outside of our budget in debt, which we were able to do thanks to partners, donors, et cetera. We started 7 years ago with $8 million budget. And like I said, bankrupt basically. Today, as of January 1st, we have a $20 million budget in Jerusalem and growing. And the way we were able to do that, I think a lot of it was what I said from Rav Noach, responsibility. We used to joke around like that. I had this joke. And I say that at Aish, everyone takes that achrayut, responsibility, but no one's taking responsibility, right? We would joke like, well, who's in charge of the database? Yeah, 2 years ago, there was a guy, and it was a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think, when you don't have that kind of set leadership at the top, sometimes things unravel in that way. And so we got very serious about responsibility. We implemented something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. A lot of businesses are on that. There's absolutely a chart with every single person who's responsible. We know exactly how it flows. Everyone sets quarterly goals. The organization every quarter sets 4 to 7 priorities that we have to get done in a quarter. And it was that kind of organization, like where, you want to, where you want to go and you have to figure out how to get there. And also, that 10-year goal was pretty huge. If you walk up to any single person in Aish Torah today and you tap on the shoulder and say, oh, really? You work for Aish? What do you guys do? They'll say, what are you talking about? In 10 years, we want to get 3 million Jews to study Jewish wisdom. Every single person. And to get that clarity where everyone's saying the same thing, there's a whole structure that'll get us there. I have a saying where I say that vision without implementation is delusion, right? Vision without implementation is delusion. You and I, Josh, can come up with the greatest vision for the Jewish people. If we have no idea how to get it done, we haven't done anything. And so I think at Aish, that's what we did. We took a lot of dreams. Aish was the #1 dreaming organization out there. And we said, okay, what can we get done? How can we get it done? 3 million is our goal. We're going to social media. We're hiring Jamie Geller. And then you pick up and you move and you go. And I think any organization, and I consult, I get called all the time from other organizations. And I basically tell them this, like, you got to be super honest, super transparent with where you want to go. Because a lot of times organizations, everyone's lying to each other. I mean, they don't mean to, but like no one, know where you want to go and then figure out how you're going to get there and figure out what structure is going to get there. I hate to oversimplify it, but frankly, I don't think it's complicated. You just got to get it done.
Wow. This has been just a phenomenal episode. I really, really appreciate your time and your insights, Rabbi Burg, and I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, you gave me homework. Okay. We're going to have another episode. I'm going to have to come back with answers, but John, this has been phenomenal. Thank you for everything you're doing for the Jewish world.